My rule of thumb for everyone is if you aren't 99% certain that insurance is going to pay for something, your estimate better not include it. You better be 99% certain that your estimate's right, or you keep lowering the number until you are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao, and today I'm really excited to have someone that I've known for a long time. We've been in each other's companies, but I really never have been able to get him on my podcast. He's just super busy, runs a great practice in Texas. He really helps offices with dental insurance and all the nitty-gritty things that come along with dental insurance. And my practice was fee-for-service, so these are things I'm looking to learn now as well. So please welcome to the Raving Patients podcast, Travis Campbell.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks for joining us. So today's episode is going to be titled, How Dental Insurance May Be Killing Your Reviews. So we're going to talk about dental insurance. We're going to talk about, obviously, a little bit on the review side, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into the dental insurance part of things. So Travis, thank you for joining me. Why don't you give the listeners and the viewers, because this is obviously on YouTube as well, a little bit of your background about your practice, how you got involved in this, how you're helping practices, and then we'll jump into the content of the podcast.
Okay. I started a practice from scratch when I graduated 12 years ago, and I screwed up almost everything you could screw up in an office, which is what I commonly tell people. It was an interesting journey, but I learned a lot. And one of the things that bugged me the most over the years was dental insurances. Most people can imagine that's kind of the biggest frustration we have on a day-to-day basis. So I used, every resource I had to try to find answers, and there weren't really a lot of them out there. So I had to go search for them. And since there aren't a lot of resources, I ended up starting to answer a lot of questions for other people, and just kind of became a natural transition to handling insurance questions for just around the country.
Well, I still remember actually seeing one of your posts, and I don't know how long your first book has been out, but I still remember seeing your post, hey, I'm going to write a book about dental insurance. And people were commenting like, who are you? Like that, because some people didn't know. I mean, this is, how long has that first book been out now?
Well, the first book was 2018.
Okay, so 3+ years ago. So I still remember you posting that. So, because I wasn't aware of who you were back then. And you put a book out, and you said you're going to write a book. And I remember reading, someone literally said, well, people just can't write a book if you don't know anything or something like that. And people came to your defense. So it was pretty funny. That obviously, these Facebook groups have proliferated extremely a lot in the last 3+ years. And now it's commonplace to see you post an answer. I don't know how you have time to write all that stuff. Yeah, your responses are pretty impressive. So you spent a lot of time putting those thoughts together. So I give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, thank you. I cheat, though, because I have Facebook set up to where it just emails me every time there's a post to look at. So.
Oh, really? Oh, that's something I didn't know that. I guess I'll have to talk to you about that offline and learn how to do that. So that's really good. So how are you helping practices now? What do you do for them? Are you doing consulting? I know you have another book you wrote, which is all based on insurance. So why don't you just briefly talk about that?
So I do some coaching for dentists, basically mostly about business or efficiency, scheduling, things like that. But a majority of my time outside of the office is fielding insurance questions. I host a few insurance conferences, and we've got the website that's launched that is basically a training platform online for learning everything about insurance. And we do monthly Q&A sessions. I write articles on a very regular basis for it. And then all the members, they get to just ask me questions day to day. So I get to field those insurance questions on a regular basis. So it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the Q&A side of things for insurance.
And you have two practices that are more PPO heavy than not, correct?
Correct. Both our offices are in network with pretty much everybody.
Gotcha. So you've kind of wiggled your way through those obstacles as being a network provider, and have been pretty productive at doing things.
Yeah, and what a lot of people, some people don't know is I was almost completely out of network 3 years ago. I actually went back in network, and the office income when I went back in network went up $700,000.
Wow.
Which is the opposite of what you usually hear from people. And that's why I talk to people about it all the time is, yeah, if you want to go fee for service, absolutely go for it. I mean, there are some definite upsides for that. As you can portray. But at the same time, being a network doesn't have to be a death sentence either for the business. And that's a lot of what I teach people.
Yeah, that's really good. So we'll learn more about that information towards the end so people can reach out to you and learn more about what you do. So let's talk about some of the things we wanted to talk about. I think one of the first things you wanted to talk about was, why people are leaving negative or having negative experiences or leaving negative reviews in the dental practice when it comes to the dental insurance part of things.
So Google's always fun because they're all about analytics. They'll give all sorts of data if you ask for it or know where to find it. And, the one about negative reviews for offices, if you look throughout the country, and you see this all the time too, I'm guessing, the number one complaint with an office is billing and insurance concerns. And it usually hovers around 50%. So it's half of the reason that people get negative reviews is about money and insurance. And therefore, it's important to know how to combat that, if nothing else. The number one thing I'd say with insurance on these negative reviews that I've seen is about estimates. It's about patients not knowing up front what's going to get covered. And of course, we all know insurance is not going to tell us to the penny what they're going to cover, and they're also not going to tell us whether they're going to cover something a lot of times. So my rule of thumb for everyone is if you aren't 99% certain that insurance is going to pay for something, your estimate better not include it. You better be 99% certain that your estimate's right, or you keep lowering the number until you are. I mean, that's the answer. And therefore, a lot of us tend to think that our estimates have to be perfect. No, our estimates just have to make sure that the patient's not out of pocket unexpected amounts of money. I mean, if you tell the patient afterwards, hey, insurance paid more than they told us that they would pay, then yeah. And notice I didn't say it was more than we estimated. It wasn't our mistake. It was the insurance company's mistake because they won't tell us that detail. So always be the hero to the patient, but always make sure we got to realize that a lot of our patients don't have unlimited funds. And they definitely don't have funds that are already slotted for dentistry. I mean, nobody has a dental savings account, unless, well, maybe 1 in a million do. But because of this, they don't plan for us. And so if we give them unexpected bills later, they're right to be mad. And that is a problem that we need to solve ourselves.
So it's interesting. I recently saw a dentist on a popular Facebook Live with somebody. I'm not going to mention anybody's names. That's what this is about. But being in the position I'm in, and I work with thousands of dentists, I do research. When I see someone, I just look them up. That's what I do. It's part of how I kind of, and I went to her website, or I went to her Google page, and she has 4.1 stars and 113 reviews, which is on the lower side. So I was curious. So I'm just going to read you, and anything that's identifying, which I don't think there is, I'm going to take out. But it says here, unethical billing practices. Told up front, getting work done was what our copay was, only to get a bill for over $2,000 extra. Evidently, the dentist is out of network, but we were told they expected our insurance to pay much less than they did. Never would have gone there if they told us the truth from the beginning. So that's the first one. Okay. This one's really long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says the billing practices are beyond unethical and incompetent. Both my wife and I had terrible experiences with them. We totally had to pay more than expected after the insurance paid. Third one, bad service and terrible billing systems. Stay away. We stopped going there because their billing systems were a mess. We could be getting a bill after the insurance paid. We thought we didn't know anything else. So it's like exactly what we just spoke about over and over and over again. It's not about the dental work, okay? It's about the fact that there's issues with the billing and what they're estimating with the insurance.
Yep. It's purely about how to run a business. I mean, that's what makes or breaks almost all of us. And the funny part is we're not trained on any of that. We're trained to be a dentist. And yet, if you look at these reviews, it's less than 5% that are complaints about the actual dental treatment. So it's not about how good or bad you are as a dentist. It never has been. It's about how good and bad you run the office.
100% so. So let's delve into a little bit deeper into this whole concept of estimating insurance benefits. And I know you said, hey, if you don't know what's covered, you better change your tune. But do you have any tips and tricks for people to go through when they either are dealing with the insurance company themselves or they're getting information if they use a third-party verification service? What is the best way to handle these estimates? One, if you're out of network, of course, but even if you're an in-network dentist, to make sure that the patients are getting pretty close to what the expected copay is supposed to be.
The number one answer, if you can do it, if you have a team member to do, is call and get a breakdown for every policy. I mean, you have to do it once a year, but you also have patients that can share policies. So a lot of people work at the same company, and you only have to get the breakdown once because it'll be the same for everybody under that group number. And that's what a lot of people don't think of is, they'll put in a group information, but they won't link it to other patients. So that can be a huge time savings. But that's the only way to get completely accurate data, or at least as close as possible, is to pick up the phone. I mean, the challenge, though, is you're usually waiting 30, 40 minutes on hold. A lot of companies now have online portals, which some are better than others, but you can get a lot of information online. And then just to make sure that you know the basics. And that's what I teach people all the time. I mean, the number one thing, and it's interesting that there's always a confusion with this, is downgrades. The most common one is, you do a posterior composite, it's going to downgrade to amalgam. Well, all that means is you still collect the amount of what you did. In network or out of network, doesn't matter. You still collect for the composite. Insurance is just paying the amount for an amalgam, which is a lower amount. So instead of them paying 80% of the procedure, they may pay 60% of the procedure. That's all the downgrade means. So what I talk to people about with estimates is if you don't have that breakdown or clear information that there is or is not a downgrade, assume there's one because they're very common. And therefore, if there wasn't a downgrade, patient ends up with more money later. But that way there's no surprises. So it's with everything on that is if you know all the general normal common exclusions, then you just estimate for them if you don't know that they exist. And therefore, if you're wrong in the patient's benefit, not in the fact that you have to collect money from them after the fact.
And that makes a lot of sense. Another common thing that we see is when it comes to missing tooth clauses. When they change insurances or their tooth is out years ago and they want to replace it. I mean, I've got into the habit of telling if you're missing a tooth prior to the insurance picking it up, it's not going to be covered. so and then if they get covered, they're happy. If not, they know that they didn't get coverage. So because that happens so many times. When somebody is calling to get the insurance information, obviously there's people that use, they have a sheet of paper and they write all the stuff down. Is there anything that do you think, because people do this all the time, they run through this routine all the time and yet they still don't get all the information they need. So is there any, tips and tricks on doing that? Or when you call the insurance company, is there anything that you recommend being asked that isn't commonly asked?
So for one is actually have a sheet. It amazes me some offices don't. They just go off memory. And I'm like, if you go off memory, you will miss stuff. You've got to have a worksheet. And the question I get all the time is, what worksheet do you use? And I'm like, well, that worksheet should be fairly custom to your office because our office asks a lot of things because we do a lot of different procedures. So we ask about implants, we ask about ortho, we ask about a lot of things that other offices may not do. So yeah, you could take my sheet, but you're going to be ideally cutting things out of it or adding stuff to it, depending on the services you provide in the office. But the other thing about utilizing it is making sure people know what they're asking and why. I mean, it's amazing how many ways that you can pay for certain things like exams. I mean, exams can be twice a year, they can be every 6 months, they can ever be 6 months in a day. I mean, there's so many different ways to do that. And so your sheet has to have that in there. And so we do it instead of people having to write, we do it to where most things are circleable. So it's just pick your option and go with it because a lot of these are common answers. But I would say the one that I see most often, I mean, there's so many things we see on a regular basis. Missing tooth clause is one of them. That's a big one because we do a lot of replacement teeth. I don't know. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, we ask all the time for night guards, for instance, because we do quite a bit of night guards. Is a night guard covered or not? And of course, the answer is always going to be it's either no or it's only because of bruxism. Well, If you're filing a night guard and not saying it's because of bruxism, I'm not entirely sure why you're filing the night guard to begin with. I mean, that's the whole reason.
100%
Isn't that
so.
like why we make almost every one of them? So, but it's one of those things. It just means every time you send a claim for a night guard, you should be saying this is for bruxism. Patient has signs of bruxism, damage, whatnot. So it's just playing the game, basically, is all it comes down to.
No, 100% it's a game. I think one of the biggest frustrations is, and again, I'm coming from the out of network arena. When I brought my associate in 2017, she went in network for probably 8 plans, maybe, and I was completely out of network. So we had a dual practice, basically in network from out of network for me and in network for her. So that was a nightmare anyway to handle. When I brought the new associate in, who ended up buying my practice, she became out of network again. So we went completely out of network, and it became back to the norm we were used to. But one of the frustrations I think we have is insurance companies, say they don't provide us the information on whether they will tell us if they have a fee schedule, or if it's UCR. Then if it's a fee schedule, the fee is going to be significantly lower. If it's a UCR, we're fairly confident where the fees are going to be. And then we just underestimate the number and overestimate the copay for the patient, and then we refund them if we need to. Is there any suggestions for people who are in a similar boat? I'm not talking about a dual practice, but simply out of network, when it comes to trying to get them to give you fees, or I don't know if you ask them, are we above or below the UCR? What are some recommendations there?
So insurance companies are going to have basically 2 fee schedules. That's what exists. You either have UCR, which is the insurance's fee schedule. It's not what your fees are. If your fees are actually at UCR or below, it means your fees are probably too low to begin with. The other one is a MAC plan, is the most common one. It's a maximum allowable charge. That's like a table of coverage that has nothing to do with your UCR. It's just we pay X for a procedure. So that's the one question to ask is, do you pay off a MAC plan or do you pay off UCR? Now, if you're out of network, knowing UCR obviously is the challenge. But that's where you've got to blue book it. Very similar to finding fees on a car. You've got to look at, okay, what was the past EOB that we did a similar service for this insurance company? What fee did they pay off of? And then we've got to write that down in either Excel or the practice management software and keep track of them. Now, of course, if you're starting this from scratch, you don't have any of that. There's 2 ways of doing it. Well, 3 ways. One is ask a dentist nearby. If they're nice and they have one, they can share with you, because it's always going to be based on zip code. If you don't have that, the next one is call the insurance company, act like you're going to go in network, and they'll give you a fee schedule. Now, those fees are going to be low, but at least it's something to start with. So you put that in and then blue book the rest. So at least you have a spot to start with, which means you will always be refunding patients money because it's a lower amount than what UCR is. It's the in-network fees. The final way to do it is to get close, and it takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't require calling the insurance company, is fairhealthconsumer.org. It's an online government database that keeps track of fees for any given zip code. And so it keeps track of full fees, but it also keeps track of the average insurance fees. So it's a nice place to start as well.
That makes sense. I've been on that website a lot to look at some stuff because I was curious where fees are in the area. So I want to talk. I know some of the things you want to talk about is what to do to do certain things. So what tips can you give someone to what to do with improving estimates that they're getting? Because I think that's the most important thing. If your estimates are off, you're going to be like that dentist I read, and everybody's going to complain about your billing practices because your estimates are just horrendous. So how do you improve? What is your recommendations? Should you just always, and this is just a question based on that, do you recommend if you know something's covered at 80%, but you're not sure the fee, drop it to 60% so you make up that coverage? What are some other ways to improve the estimates that you're giving if you don't have the proper information from the insurance companies?
That's one of them, is absolutely drop the percentage. And dropping it by about 20 percentage points is a fair number to, do it. So if they say it's 80% coverage, it's 60. If they say it's 50% coverage, it's 30. That's a safe number to go by. It's at least something simple to go by. The other thing to know is procedures that often don't get covered or are very difficult to get covered, making sure that you estimate 0 for those. Buildups are a common one. Now, we usually get a lot of buildups paid, but it takes a little bit of effort and knowledge. And Most dentists, the claims they send out, buildups are not going to get paid based on the documentation they have. So that's one thing, is to learn how to document better so that insurance sees what you're doing and has a rational reason for paying for it. But if you don't have that level of training yet, estimate buildups are zero from insurance and therefore 100% out of pocket for the patient. Another one is scaling and root planing. So we do a ton of these. Every office should be, because the number of patients that have perio is high. But you've got the first perio maintenance, which if you go by AAP's guidelines, should be 4 to 6 weeks after the SRP. Many insurance companies are not going to pay for the first 90 days. So what we do is we actually include the first perio maintenance into the treatment plan, but as a non-covered service, unless we're absolutely certain that it's not the 90-day exclusion. And therefore, at the SRP visit, they actually pay for the first perio maintenance visit too. So it makes that first perio maintenance visit after the SRP no extra out of pocket, because we've already collected it.
So it's really funny that you mentioned that, because that was going to be a question I was going to ask you. So when I sold the practice, the new owner was looking at kind of, fixing, I don't want to say some of the leaks in the practice, but what we found is that after scaling and root planing, we call it a reevaluation visit. We don't call it the first perio maintenance. We call it a reevaluation 4 to 6 later, is that patients weren't coming to it all the time because they had to pay out of pocket for it. Okay. So she came up with the idea, and I'm curious your thoughts, to raise the price on the scaling and root planing. Okay. And then, so it basically it includes the cost of the first perio maintenance visit, or the reevaluation visit. So the patient doesn't have to pay anything out of pocket in that visit. So what she ended up doing was she ended up raising our price on a quadrant of scaling from $325 a quadrant, or $350 a quadrant, maybe I think it is, to $395 a quadrant. Okay. So for the 4 quadrants, it was $40 more, which covers the visit for the reevaluation. My thought when she did this was, you're now going to take a fee that we're pretty level on the UCR, potentially $325, $350, and you're making it $395, and you're making it so much higher than a UCR for a quadrant. So that's going to look a little bit weird to the patient. So I'm curious, same topic, but just a different way of looking at it.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that is a backwards way of doing it that comes with more challenges than good. If patients price shop, which a fair amount do, that's going to be a challenge for you. If patients get an EOB and they see, oh, we only got, 5% coverage as opposed to 20% coverage, that's going to be a problem. Backwards, 80% coverage versus 60%. Anyway, it's a weird way of doing it versus just, look, we need to stop calling it a reeval visit. I mean, we all do as dentists. I had to break myself of this habit too. It is not a reeval visit, because reevals usually are considered part of the original service. It's not. It is a perio maintenance and it is a clinical exam. Those are 2 different codes. It should be billed as what we're doing. It should be billed as an exam and billed as a perio maintenance. Now, the fact that insurance doesn't cover it, okay, fine. Insurance is only going to cover 2 visits a year anyway. So whether they're covering visit 1 and 3 or 2 and 4, it doesn't matter. So we're jumping through hoops. I mean, and it happens all the time. Dentists jump through hoops all the time to fix a problem that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because we don't understand insurance. So that's why I say, look, insurance, just, if you don't know, estimate they're not going to pay for that first perio maintenance. Bill it like you should, like any other perio maintenance. And the patient, given what she was doing, is kind of the right concept, just done wrong. We just include it in the treatment plan. It's the first perio maintenance and the SRP is collected at the same time. And then you have your solution. But yes, we do it all the time because money is the reason patients don't come back. If you're going to have to bill them for something else, which is why I also don't recommend things that happen all the time, like billing half today and half on seat for a crown. Well, there's a very good chance you're not going to see that patient again to see the crown, because now they're out of pain. Their temporary is doing well. They don't want to pay you the other amount of money. Why we do this is just completely backwards from any other type of business.
100% so. I want to talk a little bit about narratives and improving reimbursement, because I think that that's another thing, is that we we are submitting, we're at our laurel or our wits end dealing with these insurance companies trying to get money from them all you can do is you can simply change the way you present the information to them to make the reimbursement either better. I don't necessarily think it's going to be higher per se, but better and faster. So can you talk a little bit about improving reimbursement as well?
So it's all about documentation. And I mean, we can complain about it or not. And, some of the complaints are valid. But in reality, the level of documentation today needs to be better than it was 20 years ago. I mean, technology is better. Our ability to get that documentation is easier. I mean, intraoral cameras are pretty much now in every room, where 20 years ago, they almost didn't exist. It's the information that we can collect, yes, helps us file claims better, but it also helps protect us from board issues, from lawsuits, and it helps protect us in general from patient mentality. I mean, how many times did you do a filling where the patient came back and like, my tooth didn't hurt before and now it hurts? Well, how about we pull up the picture of the massive cavity that was in your tooth? You put that on a big screen and the patient shuts up. I mean, they're like, oh, that's why my tooth hurts. Yes, we don't have to explain anything. So photography is huge. And the other thing to think about too is, and it happens all the time, our level of documentation in general as dentists is lousy. It just is. And yet most of us think it's great because
No.
we don't see it from the opposite end. And so I have a few friends that work for insurance companies that are consultants, reviewers, whatever you want to call them. And they're usually really rational, good people. And they're often practicing dentists. They just do it on the side for a side income. And yet the claims that they send me of things that they're like, oh my gosh, you will never believe what somebody sent in. They're ridiculous. I mean, the best example I have is a extraction tooth that has 10% of bone left around the root, filed for a surgical extraction. I mean, the thing is flapping in the wind. The patient probably could have pulled it out themselves. And yet you're filing a surgical extraction. Yet that is just not rational at all. I mean, we have this all the time. But the other one I see that's a legitimate complaint, but it's poor documentation, is crowns. People will send a picture of what looks like a healthy restoration, no cavity, and they file for a crown. Well, the point is, okay, the patient may be feeling pain, may have cracked tooth syndrome, everything else, but why are you sending a picture of a healthy tooth? I mean, that's going to, screw you up every time. Versus, how about you remove the crap, remove the fractures, then take a picture and send that. And that's going to be a lot more clear on what you're doing. So it's understanding what needs to be out there. Perio is another one. Perio charts are not just pocket depths. And it amazes me the level of perio education some of us have. And I say this personally, 90% of what I learned about perio, I learned after dental school.
100% so.
And so you've got to have a complete perio chart. I mean, that's the number one thing. Insurance companies will talk about x-rays all day long. X-rays don't matter. They push you towards x-rays because they know the perio chart's the real issue. And they don't want you actually fixing the real issue because then they have to pay for the service.
That's 100% right. So yes, so making sure you document properly, but also making sure you send a narrative with the right information that they're looking for. So if you do have a cracked tooth, transillumination revealed, fracture, reproducible pain on biting. I never got a crown denied if I put that on there.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's all in the narrative. It's all what you write, and you just got have to file the claims properly. Write codes, write information on there, write documentation provided, and the claims should be paid in a majority of times properly. I don't think I've ever had a crown denied that was if the service was a payable service. Okay. I may have had one that gets denied because they don't have crown coverage, but not because the tooth doesn't need a crown. So that's the interesting part of it, because I document always. I use a camera. I use an intraoral camera, not as much. I like the digital SLR because I get a better image. But no, 100% document. And I do work for the Board of Dentistry in Pennsylvania. And the stuff I see for the people that come to the front of the board, the documentation is horrific. So it's amazing. It's usually about money too, but the documentation is absolutely horrible. So documentation has to be much, much better. I agree.
Well, that's the funny thing. You said you work for the board. How many of those cases started because of money first?
Oh, wait, that's what it is. They're board cases because dentist doesn't want to refund the patient, and the patient gets pissed and reports them to the board. That's what it is. So it's crazy. If you just give the patient the money back, which a lot of us don't want to do, and I understand that, but when push comes to shove, you don't have a board case. Simple as that. So very infrequently do I see a case of pure malpractice, like legitimately like assault on the patient. A couple of those have been like that, but no, it's usually because there's a problem and they want their money back, and the dentist says no, and they and the board has to look into it. And I see, and you're in Texas. I see all the Texas stuff that's in the groups. Once they see a case, they have to look into it. There's no way avoiding that. So, so the last thing I wanted to talk about is what to do with improving treatment planning.
In terms of, that's a huge topic right there.
Well, so in terms of treatment planning and I guess, let's talk about pre-estimates, because pre-estimates have a lot to do with, insurance. I will tell you flat out, I never submit a pre-authorization. Okay. It's a pre-denial in my case. I tell the patients we don't do it. And I tell them why, because I know I'm confident in my abilities. I am confident in my treatment planning. I'm confident in my diagnosis. So I just don't do it. It's amazing because I give a case acceptance class, and it's amazing how people do pre-estimates because the insurance says they have to do it. So what's your thoughts on that?
In most cases, pre-estimates are more damaging than good. The best statistic out there, which is fun and why insurance companies love them, is 70% of predeterminations never result in a claim. And what most of us don't understand, because we don't run a business that functions off this, although it is extremely common in every business, even dentistry. If your client walks out the door without purchasing, there's a 90% chance that they will not purchase. Now, we are spoiled in that client will come back in 6 months for their hygiene visit and we can try again. But the concept is if they walk out of your office without accepting, meaning booking an appointment, putting a deposit, something, there's a very good chance they're not coming back until their next hygiene appointment. And we've lost them, which means if you're throwing out a bunch of pre-estimates, then you're losing a lot of treatment acceptance. Now, there are a few offices that are exceptions, but in general, that's the rule I've usually seen. Now, the other thing to think about too is too many people link it to medical and call them pre-authorizations. Pre-authorizations are a thing in medical, and they are guarantees of payment in medical. They're also typically absolutely required to pay for anything in medical. Dental is the exact opposite. Shocker. Dental insurance and medical insurance are almost polar opposites on almost every aspect. So we don't have pre-authorizations in dentistry unless you work for the VA. The VA actually does pre-authorize, but actually I like them because if they say they'll pay, they'll pay. But that's what a pre-authorization is. Everything else in dental is predeterminations, which at the bottom of every single one says this is not a guarantee of payment, meaning I'm a worthless sheet of paper.
Yep, exactly.
So here's what people usually use them for, though. They use them because they aren't confident in the estimate. That's it. So we do two things. For one, again, the rule I said at the beginning of this podcast. If you aren't 100%, 99% certain, because nobody can be 100% certain. If you aren't 99% certain that something's going to get paid, lower the amount until you are 99% certain. And then you already have your predetermination right there. The other side of it is to tell the patient, because some patients ask for them because, the previous office did it or the insurance company. We get around this question almost always, and we go, look, the predetermination is only going to tell you the level of information that we already know. We are confident in the plan that we gave you, and this is what the amount is. Would you like to get started, or what other questions do you have for me? Basically, move past it. Patients want to hear confidence. That's what they're looking for, and that's what they're trying to get out of the predetermination. So if you portray that confidence in your estimate, you would have no reason to send it. Now, the one exception I have to all of this is there are a couple scenarios where predeterminations can be a very good thing. One is you're going to have to wait for the treatment anyway, meaning you just pulled a tooth and grafted it, you're doing an implant in 3 or 4 months. You're going to wait anyway, send it. It doesn't hurt because you'll get it already. The other is if the patient already said no to treatment and walked out the door without booking an appointment. Send a predetermination. Not because you expect the information, although, okay, maybe the information may help, but it sends it to the patient. And then you have a reason to pick up the phone and contact the patient again and say, hey, look, insurance sent you the predetermination. Here's the level of details. Oh, by the way, insurance is saying this is important because they'll cover it. When would you like to get started? And at least gives you a good reason to contact the patient other than hounding them. So that can work a lot too, make them work in your benefit. But if you're ever using them to delay treatment, I would say that is a very bad way to do it.
Gotcha. That's perfect. Normally, guys, I'd like to do a Q&A with Travis, either like Would You Rather or one of the other pod decks we do. But this was such great content that I'm going to skip through it because I don't want to keep you guys much longer with this podcast episode. So, Travis, I know that you have a book. I know that you have multiple books. I know you have a training website. For the people who are listening to this and want to learn more about what you do or get involved with what you do you have any special offers or anything going on right now with what you're involved with that you want to offer to the audience?
Mostly just the link to the website itself, which is dentalinsuranceguyide.com. And it's about as simple as it gets. And here's what I tell people. We don't do discounts on that website because the website is stupid cheap to begin with. I mean, it's $30 a month. So, we do monthly Q&A sessions. So you can log in and ask questions all the time. We've got, almost instant. You send me an email through that and I'll answer you within a day. I mean, there's so much value on that website that if you don't get your $30, I'll give you $30 back is really what it comes down to. So, it's just, I do it because my goal has been to make insurance easier for everyone. And the funding from that website is actually going to fund some really neat things in changing the insurance industry. So that's what I would love to see people in a couple of years and go, hey, the money you paid on this, guess where it went?
Perfect. Other than going to the website, if somebody did have a question and they didn't want to go into the website, what's the best way someone can get in touch with you or reach out to you with I mean, you're in tons of Facebook groups. So what's the best way for someone to do that?
I mean, you can Facebook message me if you want. I answer those all the day. But I would say the website has it. There is a Ask Travis a Question. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me is, I answer. And I will say from an email point of view, I will answer emails from that website far faster than I'll answer them direct.
There you have it, directly from the horse's mouth, as I guess you can say. Well, Travis, thank you so much for sharing your insight into the dental insurance, let's call it a game, how to get more money, how to get better estimates, how to deal with pre-estimates and those types of things, and dealing with some of the reviews or how to avoid those reviews that you may get when it comes to the money part of things. If you want to hear more of Travis, reach out to him. If you like this episode, please share it with your colleagues and friends. Check us out on the podcast network on Apple. Subscribe to the episode, review us. People, I love reviews. I love hearing how much this podcast has meant to people. That's why I do it. You can check out ravingpatientspodcast.com as well for more information. And as I always say at the end of these episodes, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, Travis, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, and we'll see everybody soon.
Thank you, Lynn.